Hi everyone, it's Chelsea. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Before we get started, I just wanted to say how awesome our guest is and how much I loved the poem that is read in this episode. So make sure you stay tuned to listen for that, and also look on our social media and you will be able to read the poem there as well. And I also wanted to quickly apologize to Antje for pronouncing her name wrong throughout this episode, even after she corrected us, and I'm probably still saying it wrong, but I hope you enjoy this episode, and thank you to Antje for coming on and sharing her story. Welcome back to Out Loud, the Selective Mutism podcast. I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Ann, Chelsea's mom.
And today we have a guest. Her name is Antje. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here. I think it's really important to have people on the podcast who have had selective mutism other than me, because it shares everyone's different experiences and it's different for everyone. So thank you for coming on and sharing. I know it's not easy.
And Antje's joining us from, is it Sweden?
Scotland.
I'm sorry, Scotland. Okay, so it's 5 p.m. where she is, and it's noon where we are, but luckily we've timed it right. And so happy to have you on. So did you guys connected through email? Is that how it came to be?
Yeah.
So how did you find the podcast, Antje?
I really enjoyed listening to your podcast.
Good. That's good. It's always amazing for me that somebody in Scotland just found us and is listening to us. I think that's amazing, because that's kind of our goal is to spread news and spread awareness about selective mutism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I found you via groups and social media.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
And I found out about the podcast and I started listening to it.
Great. That's super.
So you grew up with selective mutism, right? And I'm just wondering, when did you first experience that? How old were you?
I think it started when I went to school first.
Yeah.
Because that was the time when I was exposed to other children, other people, strangers.
That seems like it's always the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when it's the most noticeable to other people, yeah. And I guess how long do you still feel like you struggle with that sometimes? Or do you feel like it's behind you?
Most of it is behind me, but sometimes maybe it's also just anxiety.
Yeah.
It can be hard to tell the difference, even for Chelsea and I, as she was growing up. I think, I don't know if you heard the podcast when we talked about Dr. Kurtz at the Child Mind Institute. And Chelsea really was cured, or, selective mutism was behind her, but she still had anxiety. So we were sort of confusing the two, which is easy to do.
I think a lot of the time with social anxiety, it's you can have trouble talking to new people or starting conversations or just reaching out to someone. But that it doesn't always mean you still have selective mutism. It could just mean that you struggle with social anxiety, and that's part of that.
Mm-hmm.
There are always new situations that you might encounter.
Yeah,
exactly. So as a child, do you remember being in school did you have to do presentations for the class, and were you able to do that growing up in school?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I had problems talking with other children, so socializing or initiating things, but speaking to the teacher was okay when I had to do it. So in a minimal way, low profile as in maybe you would say now.
Uh-huh.
So I could say a few words and I could do what was expected, so that I didn't have too many problems.
You kind of were able to make yourself do what you needed to do to get by, which is kind of like Chelsea. Chelsea would always, it was awful for her, but she made herself do what she needed to do at school, kind of. So at home, were you talkative at home and you felt comfortable at home in your own surroundings?
Yes.
Yeah. And how about relatives, Angie? Like I know a lot of children when they have selective mutism are comfortable at home, but they can't talk to aunts and uncles or grandparents. Were you able to do that?
Yeah, also just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
My aunt worked in a nursery or kindergarten, and so she played games with us. So that was okay because that was in a structured way, but I didn't really make friends with other children, like my cousins, for example.
Yeah.
I don't know why. For me, I always had more trouble with my peers, like people my own age, but I found it easier to talk to adults, or I guess sometimes children younger than me, but it was always easier for me to talk to adults.
Kids can be kind of mean too. Like, I don't know, deliberately or not deliberately, kids can, I mean, did other children do that to you, Angie? Did they say like, why do you not talk? Did other children notice it, do you think?
Yes, I think so. Children notice that you are different, and then you get questions, you get bullying, all this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able as a child to participate in any activities outside of school, like dancing or, any other activities?
There wasn't really much going on where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also not known at the time.
Correct.
I mean, nobody knew about SM.
Right. Yep.
My parents didn't know, my teachers didn't know, the other children didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I didn't know.
Yeah, so when did you find out what it was?
I think I was about 20 when I happened to read a book about psychology.
Ah.
And I found something about speech anxiety and mutism and social anxiety, and I felt like that must be it.
Wow. So that's amazing that you lived like your whole childhood not knowing what was going on, and you were able to, I guess, like survive. And
Yes, and you can't answer the question, why do you not talk with that? I had no answer.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you never got like professional treatment or anything. How did you
No.
What you said you read a lot of like self-help books, like how
Yeah.
did you get through it?
I read a lot, like everything I could find about the topic, online, and I tried to understand what it is and what I could do and hear about other people's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps.
Yeah. I keep saying like, yeah, sorry. I was just saying that now that the internet is a thing, like we can find other people who experienced it, and it makes you feel a lot less alone, because when I was little, I didn't know other people had it, or even that it was like this community of people. So it's nice that you can talk to other people who had it now.
Do you know anyone else, Angie, that has or had selective mutism?
I know lots of people from the online groups.
Okay, that's nice. Great.
But not in person.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have siblings, Angie, growing up, like brothers or sisters?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got a brother.
And were any of them shy or quiet, or did they have any issues with selective mutism looking back?
No.
No, just you.
I mean, it is probably in my family. I heard something about our relatives or what my parents did when they were children.
Yeah, there's usually like a history of at least anxiety as well in the families.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Antje, what I'm surprised that you went to like a conference or whatever about psychology. So can I ask what type of work you do as an adult?
I write poems.
You write poems?
And I volunteer a lot. And I studied information studies.
Okay, yeah. Huh.
Not psychology.
Not psychology. I was wondering. That's great. Nice of you to do a lot of volunteer work. I'm just curious, what type of organizations do you volunteer with?
It's mainly something like gardening and conservation work, because I like nature. I like nature and being outside.
Do you find like when you're volunteering, like that's something you're passionate about clearly? Like is it easier to like socialize with other people when you're doing that?
Yeah, you're not alone, and there are other people that might be lonely, and I was able to speak with them and practice speaking with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess a lot of times too, it's easier to talk when you're passionate about something,
Yeah.
When you're really interested in it and they have the similar interests. Angie, were you bilingual as a child? I know you had mentioned to Chelsea that you grew up in Germany before moving to the UK.
Yes, that's where I grew up. But I learned English later, so I can't really say I grew up bilingual. But now I am bilingual, I think.
Do you find it easier to speak in one language more than the other?
Not really. I mean, I speak German with my family, and I speak English where I live here now. That's strangers or other people that I met here.
I think for some people, some people do find it easier to talk to strangers or whatever because there's no expectation in some circumstances.
Or it's more, there's no history, like you don't have a past relationship.
They don't know.
Yeah,
right.
It's kind of like a fresh start.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's harder.
I mean, it is the zone where you talk safely with the family, the parents and siblings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean.
Are you able to speak with your cousins now as an adult? Now that you couldn't speak, easily with as a child, or has it kind of stayed the same?
I think it's better now in general. I think the older I get, the better it gets. And it is also what happens in your life, what you have to do for your job or for education or whatever you do. You just grow and get more exposure.
Yeah, that's true. For college, did you have to move away from home, Antje, to go to college, or did you stay at home?
And at the beginning, I stayed at home and went to a college, university nearby. And then I went to the UK for an exchange program, just to try that out for a couple of months.
Good for you. That had to be difficult.
Yeah.
I know as a parent being on the other side, you worry so much. Chelsea did some exchange programs. You just worry that, I always worried that Chelsea, if something happened, she would be able to ask for help, because that can be very difficult, asking for help or asking for assistance. So how was, do you feel you did a lot of self-help reading books? Is there any one book that sticks out in your mind that you would recommend to people?
I particularly liked Maggie Johnson's book.
Maggie Johnson?
Maggie Johnson's book. Yeah, it's a UK book, I think. She's a well-known speech and language therapist. It's a resource manual.
Oh, yeah.
That has lots of tips how to deal with SM at school and so on. And also for adults.
I know that book now. I think it's the Selective Mutism Manual or something, resource manual. I'm just always amazed by people who are able to, who never had, therapy, but they were able to overcome and just push through life with this, extreme anxiety. I think it's amazing. Is there something, you wish more people understood? Because I know selective mutism is very misunderstood a lot of the time. Is there something you wish people knew more?
Yeah. It's not a choice. It's not something to take personally. Like when teachers thought you were stubborn, it's just more understanding needed in general. I think people don't know that this exists at all. If you tell someone, then they don't understand what this is about.
Yeah.
That's my experience.
Do you think it's gotten any better in the UK, over time? Do you think more people know about it now?
It's getting better, but it's not really well known. I mean, compared to the 80s or 90s, there's a lot going on now.
And I find it pretty amazing, right? Like you said, for somebody that had no therapy or whatever, that you're able to just read and self-help. So do you feel, Antje, like you are over selective mutism, that it's more anxiety, or do you think you still struggle in initiating?
I'm not really sure, but I think I can initiate now, at least with one person or in small groups. I'm still working on that, and
Yeah, I think, well, I don't know if this is correct or not, but I always used to think that, or I always, when Chelsea was little, because we would make charts at home, goals each week, and initiating conversation was one of the last goals we had for Chelsea. So I remember specifically telling her her goal for the day was to turn around in her chair at school and ask the girl behind her for a pencil. And it's very difficult to do. It's very hard. But yeah, right. I think if you keep working on it every day, like kind of, I used to tell Chelsea, once a day, I wanted her to initiate something. I don't think we ever accomplished it, to be honest. But
I was probably like, oh, I don't need a
yeah.
pencil. I'm not going to ask
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. But I used to try to make things up to try to get her to do them. But yeah, it's very tough. I know ordering food is, for children with the selective mutism, ordering food in restaurants is a difficult task. Do you have any memories, Anja, of like when you were first able to do those things? Was as an adult, or did you overcome it as a child, do you feel?
I think it helped when I had to do it alone. When I was with my family, my mom always ordered for somebody else, and so I didn't really get to try.
It's difficult, right? If you don't know, especially if you don't know what it is. As a mom, before you're diagnosed or before you know your child has selective mutism, right, you try to help them, like you're helping them in your mind, but the more we learn about selective mutism, we learn we shouldn't be helping so much to give the children the opportunity to do those things for themselves. But yeah, it's tough. And I think you're right. Once your mom's not there, you're kind of put in that position where you either have to, you have to do it, or you're not going to get accomplish what you want. Were you able to, to go on job interviews and things? You must have found that very difficult to get a job, to go on an interview.
I've done a few and they didn't go very well.
Yeah, that can be tough.
They usually said I wasn't enthusiastic enough and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that too. Like your personality can't come out when you have a lot of anxiety and you're in a stressful situation. It's hard to just show who you are. And I think people with selective mutism can come across as very like flat and like no emotion sometimes, but it's just that anxiety. Like it's so hard to get anything out that it comes out like so flat but it's so hard to get even that little amount out. I don't know if that makes sense.
Did you have any physical symptoms, Anja, as a child? Like Chelsea, I know we've talked about on the podcast, Chelsea would faint. Did you ever have any physical symptoms that your mom and them could recognize?
I think I felt stiff and frozen somehow. And probably my voice would go very quiet if I said a word or so.
So you had the stiffness, the freezing that kids have with selective mutism.
And I had these thoughts in my mind. I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but I didn't say it. And that could go on for hours or however long I would meet someone. And if I was in a group, for example, in a group discussion, I wanted to say something and nobody asked me. And I would think, say that, but I would never say it.
Yeah, it's very isolating, right?
Yeah.
It's so good now with the internet that you can reach out and share and be in other groups with other people that have selective mutism. I think that's huge for people. So when you were young, I'm just curious then, where people didn't really know about selective mutism, did everyone just think you were shy? You must, I don't know the word,
Yes.
but you must have, your relatives just called you shy.
Just super shy.
I know Chelsea, I've said this before too, she hated that word, hated the word shy. She would always get home and say, should be angry. I'm not shy. So when we met people.
I don't like it either.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, she'd say, I'm not shy. And it was true. She'd get home. She has all kinds, opinions, and people would say, well, low self-esteem, but she really didn't. She was very confident, at home. But it just presents that way to other people.
Yeah, I don't like that when people say you're so quiet. People say that without thinking, and they probably have no idea why this would be.
Right. Hurtful. It can be hurtful to people. I was going to say, do you have like a creative outlet or something then for a lot of people that can't express themselves verbally, are creative in other ways? And so Chelsea says you write poems.
Yeah.
Did you write poems as a child also?
Yeah.
You did. Did you want to share one with us? Do you feel comfortable reading one, Antje?
Yeah, I wrote one about selective mutism.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
It's called Silence. Talkative at home, happy and loud, but quiet and withdrawn in a crowd. Silent at school and in the shop, does this selective mutism ever stop? It is not a choice, this hiding of the voice. When people are around, there is no sound. Like a sudden freeze, being in a tight squeeze, unable to talk, nowhere to walk. Observing and listening is easy to do, but asking and joining in is hard to pursue. Keep trying and trying again, nothing is ever in vain. If people only knew that kindness is the thing to do, inclusion, no pressure, and some fun in life is all that is needed to thrive.
My God, that's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it really captures what it feels like.
Are you okay if we share that, Antje? Like if we put it in print and shared it on our website?
Send it to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
I love that. It's perfect. It's just like perfect.
I think someone who is not talking is not really noticed anywhere. So invisibility is something like our superpower. And I also wrote a poem about this.
I love that. Invisibility is our superpower. You're right. It is there are some superpowers. We've talked about this kind of before a little bit, Chelsea and I, that I hate to say that there's good things about selective mutism, but I really kind of think there are, in how you develop as a person. It does affect who you become as an adult.
It is not necessarily a bad thing to be quiet, isn't
exactly. Yeah, I know, Chelsea, when you're not speaking, I mean, you notice so much more that's going on around you and other people. And I think, that is a gift, really. Do you have any goals, Antje, for the future? Any specific goals for yourself? Do you set goals for yourself, or just in general, you try to improve?
I'm trying to improve with everything I do. And at the moment, I'm writing a novel, and there's some character in it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We'll see how that goes.
Good for you. That's wonderful. Yeah, it seems like writing is you're gifted, and it's your creative outlet. That's super. Yeah. Is this your first novel, Antje, or have you written before?
It's my first.
Your first. Well, good for you. Good luck. Good for you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd love to read it someday if you finish it and you want to share.
Okay. Do you have anything, Antje, that you want to share that we didn't ask you about?
Just one thing to adults or people who have SM: never give up. Just feel the fear and do it anyway. Just put yourself into the situations.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Do you, I guess this is just kind of made me think about, like, usually we talk about children all the time, children with SM, but what about adults that are still struggling, with selective mutism? Have you found any groups out there online or anything that are specifically for adults?
Yeah, for example, on Facebook, the SM Space Cafe is for adults. But a child grows up and becomes an adult, and if they don't have any treatment, than you have an adult with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you consider going or for treatment as an adult? Would you feel comfortable doing that, or you feel like you just don't really need that?
It depends on the person, I would say, but it is incredibly difficult to find a therapist as an adult, I think.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right about that. It's hard enough as a child, but I can imagine as an adult, it's even rare, really.
That's why it's important to get help for your child.
Exactly. Yep. A lot of people I know in the US, we see a lot of times people will say, should I just wait? It'll go away. And because now that people do know what it is, and some people still choose to wait, which breaks my heart. Yeah. Okay.
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I know it's hard to talk about this. You're being very vulnerable, especially sharing your poetry. And I'm so glad you did because I loved it. I think a lot of people are going to relate to it too.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Antje, for coming on. It is tough putting yourself out there, like Chelsea said. And I'm just glad that we were able to have you on and talk to you and learn your story. And I love the poem. It just touched my heart. And I love that you're writing a book. I can't wait to, hopefully someday we'll be able to order it on Amazon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.